Thank you so much for having me here, and this is the first time after nearly exactly 2 years speaking at the conference and now presenting 2 books. Before the pandemic it was 1 book, but the pandemic lead to the second book, and thanks for Peter and Paul, which makes me to being Mary, for giving these introductions and for the ideas of having these iterations within certain time parameters, like Peter mentioned the Victorian style and Paul led over to the new tendencies. And this is something I want also to show in my presentation today, that every generation, so to say, has to make its own decision, recovery or explanations for certain facts. One thing I want to mention here is the class of Zachary Lieberman, which is called Recreating the Past. So he's studying computational artworks from Muriel Cooper or Vera Molnar, and lets his students create these amazing works with contemporary techniques. And so there's a gaining of aesthetics and analysis and techniques and also knowledge, because they can build on what the real OGs did like 60 years ago. So to say, the ideas are always the same, but the techniques are evolving. I'm somewhere between happy and happier when my data is data and when 1 and 1 equals 0. This is part of the introduction to my new book, The Age of Data, by Ian Anderson, the founder of the Designers Republic. And this sentence also lets us recall what we have just heard in Paul's talk. So coming from the concrete art movement at the beginning of the 20th century, the Fluxus, and which was equal to all of these was the denial of logic and reason. And this was the reason that art after World War I, and where the Dada movement came up, and after World War II with the Fluxus, this was the focus on randomness, anti-art, and mathematical tools as a support of the avant-garde, because you can use mathematical tools very well for creating randomness. And I think Ian hit the spot here very well. So this is an example I want to show you. This sign has some kind of semantic, but it is hidden. It's coded, and you can't read the typography. But if you have the right instructions of how this algorithm was working, you can go on and decode, and in the end read Mouvo. So in a 4x5 pixel font, different horizontal and vertical lines were shifted, and this is based on a setup of individual rules. So this is just my example. Every one of you would have done this his own way, and the question is, which ones of these variation makes sense? So the sense in the context of problem solving. And this is the point when the machine, the CPU, is the executor and the designer is becoming the curator. A book which was the basis for my first book, Analog Algorithm, was Carl Gerstner's work, which is a milestone in the history of design. It's from 1964, and Designing Programs is one of his most important works. Besides, Gerstner was founder of GGK Network, which was the design agency for Volkswagen during the 60s. And in 4 essays, the author provides a basic introduction to his design method, like program as typeface, typography, picture, and method, and shows us a model for what design can be in the early days of the computer era, and of the 60s, beginning of the 70s. And I think it was also the reason why he was the founder of GGK Networks, that he could afford an IBM machine and plotter back then, because they were insanely expensive. And this book is especially exciting, what we see in the current development of computational design. So designing programs means a method and an approach as well. There are several solutions for each problem, and one of them is the best under certain circumstances, which means the solution of achieving a goal, the solution within a certain time and space we are in. So I just want to show you 2 examples that you have an idea what Gerstner was explaining. So he starts his book with very illustrative examples here, programs from the far Middle Ages. He describes these Gothic windows as very playful work of designers. Actually, they were builders, but not designers at that time. And so you see the 15 windows underneath, and no one is identical. So each window is a design in itself. 15 different ornamental patterns within this arched triangle. So you can go on and run the program backwards to analyze the parameters. So you have organic lines tracing towards the outline and to the vertical division. And then you can set up some rules of how these lines are touching each other from the range of 90 degrees angle to 0 degree angles. So designing wrong direction. In this example, programs are morphology. This is one of the best examples for showing data-based or algorithm-based design by creating patterns. So you start from a square and subdivide it, and you play with a definition of repetitions and mirroring axes, and in the end you can still combine all of these shapes with each other, and then that leads you to a vast number of possibilities. And as we have seen now, that algorithms are playing a role in this segment of design we are looking at here today. I come to my first book, Analog Algorithm, which is part manual, part toolkit, and it presents the theory of formal analysis to have a starting point and a set of rules and instructions, because before you can tell the machine what to do, you for yourself have to know what you can do with it. So these are techniques for developing new forms, new fonts, signs, or patterns. Or in the words of Carl Gerstner, instead of solutions for problems, I give you programs for solutions. This can also be understood like for no problem there is an absolute solution, like we have seen in the example of the typefaces, that you generate a vast number of material and then you have to curate this. So this is the trailer for this book in cooperation with Florian Renner, soundtrack by Turbo Knight. And if this reminds someone of Stanley Kubrick's 2001, this is on purpose, as it was the year 68 where Kubrick was having this vision of digital screens everywhere, and he was using microgramma as a typeface and also some old IBM typewriter font for his screen designs, but the screens were not computers as known today. They were just back projected negatives of dias. And the preface to this book was written by Paul McNeil, and he was at this time, I think it was 2018-19, publishing a font called Tim Hutchinson Sentinent, and this was orientated on this IBM typewriter typeface. And the idea for the layout of this book was that every page of the book should look like a still from 2001. The approach to this book, analog algorithm, I gave myself the dogma not to use any computer-generated output. This was quite funny because I was addressed by Pentagram New York to give them the Git repository for the book, but I said I can give you an open InDesign file where you can pick out all the vectors, because I really have done everything by hand to understand the process. And this is a parallel to Vera Molnar, where she says, to really process my research series systematically, I first used a technique I called machine imaginaire. I imagined I had a computer, I designed a program, and then, step by step, I realized simple, limited series. So this is what I did. I also imagined having a computer and wanted to show in the book an emancipation of the user by not giving him prefabricated, ready-made assets, but a guidance, instruction to create. So a construction kit for grid-based design process. So the design grid is anyways of central importance in graphic design because it divides formats into different playable areas, and this was what I did with all the material you saw on the first screen. So I just started to connect nails, and sooner or later I came to some process I could describe, and this was my first algorithm, or as you can find by Müller-Brockmann, he says, the designer's work should have the clearly objective, functional, and aesthetic quality of mathematical thinking. So the idea here was that every point at the top is connected with every point at the bottom edge. So to describe the problem is then part of the solution, and this implies not to make creative decisions by feeling, but by intellectual criteria or description. And the more exact or complete these criteria are, so this is all coming from these wireframes, the more interesting the work becomes. And so this was the first spread of the book I had designed. And designing these elements is then, as you have a look at the left side bottom, you have some kind of analog algorithm description of what line with which other point is connected. So, and for the website for the book then was the other way around, was the book just showing freeze frames. The website brought these freeze frames to life, and as it was an analog algorithm stuff, these were just GIF animations to be also some kind of analog in the design process. And this leads us to the ideas of Kandinsky, his teaching at the Bauhaus, and he was also focusing on deriving grids from objects. So this is a central element of this book. And he was teaching analytical drawing, and you see it here, you have this still life on the top left, and then you derive a construction grid. And what was interesting is that this empirical investigation of his whole class led not just to one design grid, but to many different ones, because you have always some subjective decisions in there. So this then would be your design grid for some Signet. This was in the when was he at the Bauhaus? At 22 to 33, so this is like 100 years ago. And this is an example from my book then. This directly leads to the question, is grid a program? And if the grid is considered as a proportional regulator, a system, it is surely a program. So I have found this image of an old tape deck and then derived 3 different construction grids from this and made some fancy typeface. And designing programs or working with this algorithmic-based design systems means finding a valid principle. So my decision was doing a typeface from a tape deck. So this not only applies to typography, this would be using these 3 derived grid systems, making some illustration, and in general speaking, this applies without any restrictions to the entire territory of the visual. And in the end, what could have been more logic than doing on the right side, you see the complete typeface from A to Z, and what would have been more logic to derive a typeface from a tape deck and put it on the jacket of some techno cassette from Detroit Underground. And this also refers to Gerstner's idea of program as music, because closest to the typical idea of a structural program come the structures in electronic music. The elements of the composition are sound units, impulses, and composing with these units means regulating one parameter, and this would be time. And the next consequence is a music video GIF animation for one track of Joe Sousa's Infinite Cold Distance. Yes, and after I have finished this book, I was in contact with different colleagues and friends, and we were discussing. These were people from different sectors of the design industry, 3-dimensional design or spatial design. I think the so we were here. So, and the story short, I was talking to people, blah, 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 and then we were discussing using data or analog algorithms in design. So this led to the second book, The Age of Data. This does not work, it's not synchronized. Yes. So, the idea was that every now and then, as Paul has also said, it takes a while for new technologies to arrive and to get accepted, but when the critical mass of ideas, progress, and the context is reached, then a new chapter can begin. And on the cover of The Age of Data, we see the work Quantum Memories by Refik Anadol, and he plays with the motive of the machine which creates new images for memories in ever new variations. And in his work he understands data as a pigment and architecture as a canvas. And in the left column you see all people featured in this project, which are about 40 artists and studios and collaboratives. And now we see a quick description clip which was on the Kickstarter page.
Systems, the hardware, the software around us are constantly changing, and the data becomes a new language between machines. But as humanity, I think we have to learn this language as well. I believe art is a form of expression, form of explanation to really create a common language around these narratives.
Where my focus is on exploring the relationship between sound and form. My aim with my work is to enhance the sound with the visual and to heighten the experience of listening to music by creating a symbiosis between the two.
This book is a snapshot of what is happening in the field of data-driven design. What new tendencies are appearing on the horizon? Like an elevator, we look at this evolution along the vertical and we see a wide range of variety of disciplines, from graphic design to robotics or immersive experiences that transcend space and time and dissolve boundaries.
Data is information. Data is knowledge. Data is motivation.
Yes, so this was the clip to playing around here. So the idea was that if making a book on data, also to realize it on using a Kickstarter project. So that the data is in the whole DNA of the book, and yeah, it took like 4 days after the campaign was launched to receive the first needed amount of money to co-finance this. And the most important tool or channel for this was actually Twitter, because every one of the featured artists has tons of followers, and so one tweet reached nearly 110,000 impressions as it was shared within this group. And yeah, and here you see some merch also available on this Kickstarter page, like different special edition dust covers, t-shirts, tote bags, and an LP of Detroit Underground, which is a cooperation of Dee Fasten and me and Kiro and Steph Copeland, which will be out in June or July. No, next.
Yeah, I saw the Age of Data project. I wish I was in it. I wish I was in it because Joel was in it. I'm really excited for a lot of my friends who are in the book. I wish I was in it.
So this was happened between during the campaign, that there was an interview with Joshua Davis, and I actually didn't realize that he wanted to be in the book. But so we jumped on this train and made a little campaign, #WishIWasInIt. And so Joshua also is in the book, and we had a very interesting interview of how NFTs were saving artists and designers during the lockdown. And so this is the complete list of all artists. So you see this is going through different sections, like Adam Basanta doing very illustrative approach, or Bowder with white void, light immersive experiences, and Studio Drift also here with stage design, and Dirk Coy with the clip for Yellow, and an interview with Zachary Lieberman about code randomness, which also touches the field of Dadaism and where it's all coming from. Daito Manabe, and as we have seen in the clip, Tina Tuli. I will now present a few spreads of designers' project features, and then focus on 3 artists, Daito Manabe, Christopher Bauder, and Refik Anadol, who all sent greetings to here. And the age of data is going vertical. So this was my theoretical approach. If analog algorithm was touching every point in graphic design, from pattern to typefaces and so on, on a horizontal, you go in the vertical through the different categories of design. 3-dimensional design, and robotics, and installation. And you can say that this volume focuses on the aesthetics and the creativity of a new generation of designers who are using these tools, because this book would have not been possible 10 years ago. So we have now reached some point where you also have the CPU power to come up with this, that the execution of these ideas is valid. So this is an example for a project in the book. It's a cooperation of Thomas Kurpa and Andreas Filström, which shows the semantic machine interpretations. So this is an algorithm Andreas has written, which lets the CPU echo the type design of Kurpa. Then Russian collective Kuflex and Detroit Underground, they take with symbiosis the human body and augment it with some geometrically designed but biomorphic looking layers that the person becomes some kind of creature. Berlin-based engineer Andreas Lutz tries in Soft Takeover to show in a kinetic machine that this can also be or feel like an autonomous, self-aware being which is sending out messages you have to decode. And another interview was with David Sheldon Hicks, the founder of Territory, and he knows in our conversation we were talking about the narratives of a tangible AI, that the physical world overlaid with the digital is the next big paradigm movement. Which leads us to the first project I will describe a bit more in detail. Electric Stimulus to Face is a performance created by Daito Manabe that features human facial expressions created by sound. And this is just possible with sensors on the skin, which are directing the output of the sound onto the face and let the muscles twitch. So a machine can simulate a perfect smile, but it fails to look like a real smile until you put the emotions behind it. So this is the problem here. And what's also interesting, if you look at this image here, that while a lot of digital art prides itself to be seamlessness and hiding the wire and the code, Manabe's work is embracing the aesthetics of the tools and looking like some DIY cyborg. So one can also connect these ideas to Darwin's galvanism at the end of the 20th century, where they were experimenting with frog legs and stuff, or this direction, and this idea was now newly interpreted. Another work of Daito Manabe explores another approach of human machine interface. It's not that visual. It's on another level. It's some kind of synthetic brain and body control prototype. So he is reading the brain parameter and he can generate a dance using brain decoding technologies. And of course, there are no restrictions here on the body itself, neither gravity nor anatomical parameters like the limitation of movement. I could not do that. So instead of noises and glitches are then produced by different thoughts, and in the end it looks like this. The next project of Manabe goes in visually in about the same direction, but concept-wise it's a bit different, and it's the music video Terminal Slam by Square Pusher, Warp Records, and this is a video where Manabe is in Tokyo deleting these advertisements or signs around the city and is replacing them with visuals from Square Pusher, like audio reactive impulse. And the inspiration behind this is that idea of Manabe that in the future the scenery of a city will be rewritable with AR, VR glasses. So, and the process behind is that the raw material was analyzed and masked, but these are very complex processes, so this was not 100% possible with AI, so it needed support by human decisions. So there were 3 different technologies used. The first one is the standard object detection to recognize the position of the different advertising panels, and this has been done by machine, but then the segmentation of this material, the classifying, has then been done by hand. So you have here all the spaces to exchange. And then the third one is the image in paint, so the image restoration, the technique which is applied to create the video, and the masks which were used from data sets to add optical camouflage effects and glitch effects to the shapes where the humans were. you can watch this for yourself because takes ages. But you see this process from DIY made cyborg interfaces to the human synthetic deforming, here to architecture as a medium of experience, which leads to the next artist from the book. I want to present it's Christopher Bauder featuring Robert Henke with the kinetic sculpture Deep Web, which is a monumental immersive audiovisual installation and live performance created by Bauder. And what began as a vague visual idea of nodes and connections between as a network, then was supported by a very impressive, captivating musical score, and became then a performance at Kraftwerk Berlin. And there it was shown in 2016 to 2019, and it attracted more than 65,000 visitors. And from the technical side, the generative architecture was based on 175 motors and 12 laser systems. So this superstructure here then brings the analogy to the network of connections and nodes, and looking like a technical drawing in space. So Bauder has now, I think it was last year, opened a permanent exhibitional space in Berlin where it's called Dark Matter Berlin. This is a old, like a building of 3 different spaces, and there you can go and watch these installations as a permanent exhibition. And coming from a light architecture to a data architecture, the next one is Refik Anadol Studios with his project Seoul Hemong, where he was cooperating with Zaha Hadid architectures. And his idea was that a city is a living entity, a constantly changing whole that is capable of remembering and learning its movements. And as with any living being, it has its unique rhythm, which comes to ebb and flood depending on the relationships between many networks in this urban ecosystem. And so he was choreographing this piece with using like 11 million images or public data from the city to form different stories of the citizens. And here you see from this number of pictures, this huge amount, where, as he has been telling before, he uses data as a pigment. And so the machine intelligence, it's not artificial intelligence, but machine intelligence as a supportive tool for the artist. He lets then, by projecting these results onto the surface of the building, he lets the building dream. So this is the idea, so that he has a new interpretation of 11 million impressions of the city. What Graphic Anadol shows us here, I think, is art in its purest form, and because he, with the help of a machine, he lets both humans and architecture dream of what was in a way that is yet to come. So, and this brings us back to our most favorite quote today, "Machine Imaginaire" by Vera Molnar. So, this is the same principle, that we are now on a point where an idea, an architectural building, which is dreaming, doesn't exist. So he uses the technique which at the moment is available to realize this project. So this leads us now to also in the context of Anadol, to the ideas how he is working with the NFTs, and I do not refer here to the PFPs, the profile picture, Bored Apes, Panzer, Amphas. I will just give an insight on how the implementation of the NFTs makes sense in the field of art and the art market. So, if you remember, it was just 1 year ago that Mike Winkelmann, aka Beeple, sold his work, The First 5,000 Days, for 69.3 million at Christie's. And last week I saw March 5, digital artist Peck. Some say it's an AKA for the KLF. Newest creation, The Merge, has fetched 91.8 million on Nifty Gateway. So this was an open edition. It had 30,000 collectors, and these collected more than 300,000 units. So you see, this is the first time that the digital artwork has reached more than, for example, the up-to-date, most expensive work from Jeff Koons, which was 700,000 lower than this in 2019. We can say that now machine learning and computer power have reached a point where not only engineers and programmers can handle it, and when data becomes art, when the organic forms curve and intervene, art is beginning to move. And one of the first enablers in this field is Artec House, which has galleries in Washington, New York, and Miami. And it is the link between digital art and the public. So this is the first step of making digital art be more available and therefore being more accepted. So what we see here is that the buzzword immersion is being stressed here completely. And unlike the real world where everyone stares at the displays of their mobile devices, here the individual is absorbed in some kind of collective experience, and it's as if they are going to the other side of the screen. And NFTs serve in this purpose the role of authentication, and so this also leads to galleries and artists using NFTs for images and clips of more complex, often generative artwork. So if the visitor to an exhibition is having this experience of being absorbed in this immersive world, they can take part of this exhibition home and own it. So here we see a piece of Anadol called Unsupervised Data Universe from the exhibition in the Museum of Modern Art last year. And last week he started his new NFT project called An Important Memory for Humanity,
This is the largest window ever flown in space. We can put our head in and fit multiple crew members and see the entire perimeter.
Which presents a series of unique and poetic data sculptures. Also funny that this is also referring to the astronauts, like we have seen in Peter's talk. It's focusing on the SpaceX mission Inspiration 4, which took place mid-last September, I think September 16th. And the drop started April 7, 2 days ago perhaps. And it also plays with the data from this mission, from the different ultrasounds or audio recorded data or heartbeat. So this is a limited edition NFT that uses the data from this space first. I think this was the first commercial space flight. And the launch of this minting was at April 7th, 9 o'clock, and I made some screenshots because it was quite interesting. So the first piece being minted is a one of one piece, and it started with 10 Ethereum. 1 Ethereum at the moment is like 3,500 euros. And this bid was reached after 4 minutes, now after 30 seconds, and after 4 minutes the bidding was at 100 Ethereums, which is about 350,000 euros. So you see here is quite a dynamic situation given. And the next one is Anadol's Dataland, the world's very first multisensory metaverse project, which is also launching these days. And the approach is to create a new vocabulary of immersive aesthetics with the help of AI and the resulting analysis of vast, huge data sets. So we will enter unprecedented spaces and be witness to innovative, poetic algorithms for entirely new experiences in the metaverse. And this is the keyword. I will end here and give it up to D. Fasten, who is up next. Thank you.